All right. Hello and welcome to the Storied Way. Today is World Storytelling Day, and you can't keep a storyteller from telling a story. So let's begin. A long time ago, or perhaps not so long ago, somewhere in the world, there was a town. With yourself. Thank you so much. There was a town that had a visitor every now and then, a traveler who carried a bag full of curious objects, traveled from one market to the other, from one home to the other, talking to people, listening to them, and trading some of those goodies that he carried in his bag. Now, everyone waited for this traveler. Once every 3 months, 4 months, whenever he was around, he would stop by and they would open up their homes, they would open up their hearts, and they would welcome him. Now, this one time when he came to this town, there was a young boy who had made up his mind that he is going to follow this traveler and ask to become his apprentice. You know, he wanted to be like him because he had not seen anyone like this traveler in his life. So he followed the traveler as he walked around in the town, meeting and talking to people, greeting everyone, stopping by, giving them hugs, shaking hands, sitting down and having a tea with them. This little boy, he stood in the corner and just observed. The traveler actually saw him and said, oh, what is it? He said, I want to be like you. I said, you want to be like me? Yes, I want to be your student. I want to be your apprentice. I want to do everything that you do. The traveler looked at him and he frowned and he said, okay, that's curious. What do you think I do? He says, I don't know. I don't know what you do, but this is what I've seen, that whenever you come, people are happy. Whenever you come, you have so many things to say to people. Sometimes you have, you find the right thing to say to the right person. And sometimes you listen more than you tell. And you listen first and then you tell. And when you tell something, the person feels very, very nice. I want to be like you. I want this power. I want this. This is something that you have. Now, the traveler was interested. So he asked, what do you think I have? I said, I don't know. It's a perhaps it's a magic. Perhaps it's power. I don't know what it is, but I want it. I want it right now, and I want it for myself. The traveler looked at him. He looked up. I looked back and said, well, what you want is something very difficult for me to teach. But if you really want it, bad enough, then come with me on this journey where we will walk into strange worlds, strange lands, mysterious paths, some which will be enchanting, some which will be fun, some which will be boring, some which will be perilous, some which will be adventurous, some which will let you gain a lot of things, some in which you will lose everything that you have, some that will open up to more paths, and some roads which will lead to a dead end. Are you ready to go on this journey with me? The boy looked at him. He gulped and he nodded. Yes, I am ready. Are you ready? I'm asking this question to my audience here tonight. Are you ready to set on a journey that we are going to take through the next 8 nights, walking through different mysterious paths, adventurous, some confusing. You will see things, hear things which you perhaps have heard before, but you will also experience things which you've never had before in your life. And I'm hoping that you will stay with me and all of us, our lovely, amazing guests who have agreed to come along the storied way as we find interesting answers to how stories and storytelling intersect with everything that we do in the world today and how our lives are connected. Wonderful. Thank you, Salome. Yes, you are ready. And so are we. On that note, on the opening night of the Storied Way, I am delighted to welcome our 3 guests, Vrishali, Bhavna, and Shraman, who are here to talk about storytelling as an essential 21st century skill. Bhavna is a fellow entrepreneur, a woman leader who enables her organization, Shenomics, works with women from various fields, helping them find their own stories, own them, and take them to the world. Vrishali, through Orange Slates, enables teachers and educators to navigate their careers, finding the right skills to excel in this 21st century. Shraman began as an acquaintance and then went on to be a client, a customer for us at Your Story Bag, and then a good friend who I can talk about storytelling and lots of interesting things about. He's Director of Fundraising, Marketing and Communications at WWF-India. And with all of them, we're going to talk about how stories are essential skills or not. Okay, so let's begin. My first question to all 3 of you: is storytelling a soft skill or a hard skill? Do you have a story where you use storytelling and discovered its power? Anyone can begin.
I can begin, Rituparna. And thank you, first of all, for that warm welcome. And really glad to be here, to be talking about storytelling. You know, my instinctive answer to you is it almost doesn't matter how we classify it, whether as a soft skill or a hard skill. But what I can say for sure, beyond the shadow of a doubt, is that it is a deeply impactful skill. So call it soft or hard, no question, it is an impactful skill. And I think in my work, personally, as well as what I've seen with other women, is stories are so central to us in helping us define who we are, define the choices that we make in our lives, define what matters to us, all of which is so important to also how we position ourselves in front of the world and the impact that we make as leaders. So I think storytelling I've seen is incredibly impactful. And one, of course, specific way in which I personally have found storytelling to be very useful is in our work when we talk about leadership, where leadership really intersects with storytelling is when we bring so many concepts, and there's so many concepts in leadership, but when we bring them to life with a story, it sticks, it stays with you. It is that you might convey. So I am definitely a huge believer in the power of storytelling.
Super. Shraman?
Sure. So, like most others, the only time I knew of storytelling or a storyteller was when I was a small boy, maybe 7, 8 years old, and my grandfather, the Dada, was still alive. And after that, since I went through the classic education system where Excel sheets and even before Excel sheets, the manual version of the Excel sheets and numbers were what we were taught was various forms of management of running organizations. So storytelling was a term that had gone out of fashion. We were not talking about it. I didn't even know it was storytelling at all. But having been a consumer marketer for the bulk of my life and having peddled everything from Lifebuoy soap to toilet cleaners to tea to packed milk, all kinds of stuff, I think it was maybe perhaps when I met Rituparna that I realized that what we were doing all those years was essentially storytelling, because there is very little that you have to differentiate between on a product to product per se. And when I look back on my the corporate life, we used to have two kinds of classic tests which were done, market research kind of tests. One used to be called a product test, where you had two products, product A and product B, and you would ask consumers which one do you like and so on. And almost inevitably, there was hardly any difference between any of the two products that you would get. And maybe with one sample, they said this one is 10% better. The other sample would say it's 10% better the other way on two like-to-like products. There was another version of this test, which was called CPT, Concept Product Test. So along with that product, you had a storyboard and some kind of a concept, this is the soap which does blah, 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 or this does this, or Geeta from Gorakhpur rubs it into her skin twice a day, and this is how she feels, blah. And the same products willy-nilly started seeming very different, and people would start associating it very, very differently. So there's a tiny anecdote I just want to narrate. For about 4 to 5 years in the early 2000s, I served in Bangladesh. And that was a time when Bangladesh was going through a bit of a churn. The Islamic movement was picking up and so on. And they came up, a lot of local manufacturers came up with a theme that our soap is halal soap. By insinuation, the soap made by multinational companies such as Lux, etc., may not be halal. So do you want to go there? And overnight, shares of these multinational soaps like Lux crashed from about 35% to 7, 8, 9%. And there was panic all around. Our product is not good. We are doing this. We must improve our product. So my early experiences when one went around to consumers and you asked, is it not good? How do you use? No, soap is very good. 5 to 6 months later, we had exactly the same soap, because any kind of a technical change is very complex, a very long process. Just a new wrapper and a little new story attached to it. And lo and behold, people would pick that soap up. Now it smells good. Now it is working well. And that's where that kind of upswing started. So that's as close, when I look back, a story where it's just a story which adds the relevance and the piece. Sorry if I've been long-winded. I thought it would be relevant to understand how that in the world of marketing and business, product is only one part of the entire thing. The product kuch bhi do, that has to be okay. The rest of it is what you're willing to pay for is the story, and that's how business works.
Absolutely. Whether it's a product or whether you're selling yourself or positioning yourself today, you need to tell a story about yourself. Rushali, do you have a story about storytelling? And you?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you said that it's a hard skill or a soft skill, I completely agree with Bhavna. But what Bhavna shared, it's a skill that everybody has inbuilt in them. Okay. So even when we talk on phone with our relatives, "Arey, pata hai, usne hai na ye kiya," is a story. Right? And we share all our incidences in a way of story. And I'd like to share one story about which was my aha moment. Okay. So I have been a teacher. I've taught in schools, I've taught in colleges, then I went into corporate and so on. I was taking private tuitions and I was telling a story of a hydrogen with one electron and how that sad hydrogen is moving and how it creates bond and so on. And my child and my students, they remember it forever. And then whenever there is an atom with one electron, they say, oh, this is friend of hydrogen. And that's how they remember the first group of a periodic table. That was the aha moment. Like, you know what? Storytelling is a way where students visualize, they learn, and I think that's the way to communicate. And that's how the lesson plan creation, the product creation, the service creation, everything is where the story is the center, and everything that is it are the characters of the story that is it. So yeah, that's my bit I want to share about story and importance of it in the journey of my life. Yeah.
Fantastic. Now that we know that, yes, each one of our speakers have experienced storytelling in some of its most intimate ways, let's ask some more direct questions. And it's an interesting anecdote for everyone who will know that Shraman and I have been in touch for a little more than a year, because he was looking for a storyteller in his team, and he had a specific ask of looking for a storyteller. And because he heads the communications, fundraising and marketing at WWF-India, he wanted certain qualities in that professional in his team. Shraman, can you tell everyone that when, as a team leader, as when you're looking for a fresh hire, what? And I was so delighted, and I said, I'm so happy that there is a job like this. I wish I was 15 years back. I would have immediately applied for it, but today I can't. But the fact that there is that job title, job description, which is asking for storytelling as a skill, is a win for us. So tell us a little about that job, the job description, most importantly.
Okay, so I'll tell you very specifically in the context of this organization. Is true in every others. WWF was formerly known as World Wildlife Fund, and that's how people associate it with tigers and all other. It does various other things in environment and sustainability, but is essentially an out-and-out scientific organization. Many of our scientists have spent years in the jungles doing research for their PhDs, why a tiger's tail twitches to the left or it twitches to the right, and other exotic things like that. The difficulty is that it's great for a scientific seminar when they are discussing a lot of these arcane issues or something which are linked to climate change and this and that. But to the yous and me's, it's deathly boring, if at all, not comprehensible in the first place. I mean, so what? And that is where this ask for a storyteller emerges. Somebody who can convert a lot of the heavy scientific mumbo jumbo into engaging stories which bring in the context, the relevance, and and the desire to know more. Is that so? Why does that happen? What happens if that species in the high Himalayas, if that disappears, and you mean it might impact our water supplies in Delhi? And no, all these, the heavy scientific stuff, unless it's put together and you realize, oh my God, I may not be able to flush my loo tomorrow morning if there's evidence that animal in the high Himalayas has become extinct because of a complex chain of environmental reactions. So this urge, this instinct to seek out and look for somebody who had this ability to understand a storyteller, was first and foremost needs to understand who is the audience. How do you get across what and what will engage and hold, where the next question is that the guys are hooked on to asking for that. So I think that's the single biggest task, that how do you spin the story? How do you turn it around? Rather than starting with the fact, what is the story? And the fact will, of course, fit in wherever it needs to fit in. But if the curiosity is seeded, then people will search it out, ferret it out. They'll do what they have to. What made it tougher is that unlike our generation who were groomed that stories mean a written story, today's stories could be a 5-second reels kind of a thing. It could be a small video cliplet. It could be, God knows. Ritu told me about how big podcasts, etc., had become, and for a storyteller with the kind of voice modulation and those. I had no clue that the world had moved on so much. Many of us will have listened to radio from the Vivid Bharati era, or now you hear Nilesh Mishra, Kahaniyan Sunata Hoon on radio. You do realize that there's a lot of power in the different formats, and formats can keep emerging over time. But the single big ask was convert the scientific mumbo jumbo, make it a tale, make it something that that people want to listen, and it's fun to listen to. It reminded me of what My grandfather would have told me as the tales he told me as an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old boy about various things. So that's where it was.
Well, so while Shraman talks about there being a specific job out there where you look for a storyteller, I'd like to move into a little more another dimension of that. Really, that when we start off, we become specialists and we start learning, undergo a course, become a specialist in one domain. We don't think as being a storyteller in that domain. I remember when I left a career in television and I had to sort of restart or reshape my career. I was in a complete, in the pits. And because I felt my entire identity of being a television producer was taken away and all kinds of things, because I didn't know what to do. And the first thing that arose in my head was the fact that I'm a storyteller. I cannot let someone take away my identity just for the heck of it. It's in my hand to reshape my identity, to take ownership of my story and steer it. So I can build a career in storytelling, of course, that as being a skill. But the fact that I can also take charge of my own story and build it as an ability. While we talk about the ability, I'd like to bring in Bhavna here. And Bhavna, I'd like to ask you, because you work with women, let's ask this. What happens to women when they take charge of their stories? Do they change the narrative about their life?
Absolutely. Because I think the biggest thing I have seen working with women, of course, working with anyone, it's true for all of us, is that what really defines our sense of self and how we feel about ourselves really boils down to the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves in our own heads. So not even talking about the kind of stories we share with others or the stories we make public or visible to the world, but 99% of the time when that conversation is only happening in your head, the question is, how are you framing your own story in your mind? How are you defining, especially, and let's look at both sides, the positives and sort of the moments in your life that you're most proud of, the defining moments in your life. Those are, of course, easier to frame and talk about and to own. And that is a big part of who we are. But at the same time, and this is what really gets in the way for most of us, and what leads to self-doubt or what breaks our confidence, is when we don't have a good story to tell about our failures, our mistakes, our regrets. And when you can look at those stories as well and reframe them in a way such that those stories, that story of failure actually becomes a story of learning. That story of regret becomes a story of resilience. That story, the whatever mistake, becomes a story of growth. When you can really reframe that, look at how you have really become the woman that you are, or the person that you are, as a result of everything and anything that you've experienced in your life, and you can powerfully share a story around that, that is central then to who we are, and really gives you a very strong sense of self that you can then do whatever you want to do in the world with. So the short answer to your question is yes, absolutely. When you can really take ownership of the stories in your life, that's everything.
Super. Vishali, coming to you, do teachers take ownership of their stories? Do they invest in their careers? Do they want to learn a new skill? Do they want to upskill and upscale and find more meaning and purpose?
So teachers, I would say, with all due respect, of course, they're like mixed bale, okay? Because there are some teachers who are so eager to learn and so eager to share their learnings and stories, and they want to upskill, they want to unlearn, relearn, they're ready to do that. Some teachers are still stuck that, oh, what I'm doing is right. That's my story. That's right. I don't want to change it. So yeah, there are perspectives, there are teachers like that. But I think the last 2 years, I did not want to bring pandemic in conversation, but of course it was inevitable, that the last 2 years where teachers had to actually unlearn and relearn a lot of things, the way they teach, the way they they interact, the teaching learning has completely changed, right? So this is where teachers who were able to learn, who were able to create, so because see, at what happened, they were at a juncture where they had to choose a path. That was the decision that they had to take, that they took, and their stories were weaved in that manner, right? Those who were eager to adapt created a wonderful story with success. They had success stories. Those who were not, they had some stories where they struggled a lot, but in the end they came there. So yes, to answer your question, there are teachers who would like to learn, upskill, and would like to upscale. There are some teachers who take some time, there is some reluctance, but with little push, they will definitely reach there.
So it's where, while we do have somebody from the teacher community here talking about storytelling, or rather any kind of learning a new skill to upskill and upskill themselves, it's true for all kinds of learning, all kinds of skills really. And we do know that while there are jobs being created for storytellers, and we're going to ask that question later to Vrishali, that will there be careers or like the schools will ask for a storytelling teacher in the future or not. We do know that when teachers, also looking from what Bhavna just said, if even teachers wants to really change their story, they can. They are no different. Let's talk about some more direct applications of storytelling. Okay, Bhavna, you create women leaders. Tell me something about, do leaders need to tell stories? If yes, what kind of stories do they need to tell?
So do leaders need to tell stories? Absolutely. The answer is yes. And what we have seen is the reason why the answer is so resounding yes is because the ability to tell stories and to move people with stories is really at the heart of what makes you an influential leader. People follow you not just because of not entirely because of the rational reasons or the logical reasons that you might be putting forth, but at the end of the day, it's because you're also able to tug at their heartstrings. And if you can do that as a leader, then you will create a loyal or a following of individuals who really are charged up with the mission or the vision that you want to really drive forward. So absolutely, because it makes you more influential, I would say yes. So what are the kinds of stories you need to tell as a leader? I think one story that I find, one kind of story that I find to be particularly helpful, and one can weave this in many different ways, is really fundamentally a story about what you stand for as an individual. So a story about your values. What is the most important thing to you as an individual? Is it family? Is it courage? Is it integrity? Is it being kind to everyone else? Is it the compassion that you feel for the world? It could be anything, but for you, because if I just say, okay, these are the things that are important to me, it really doesn't mean as much. But if I can tell you a story about that, the reason why generosity, for example, is so important to me is because growing up, I saw how both of my parents, who came from a very, very humble beginning, have spent pretty much their entire life just giving to everyone, whether it's giving to their family, giving to their communities, just giving to everyone around them. And for that reason, today, for me, generosity is my biggest aspirational value, because that is what I have seen and really breathed in from my family environment. That means a lot more. That means a lot more than me just simply saying that in words. So I think for anyone, leader, any individual, having stories to tell about what is important to you and why it is important to you, because there's always a story behind the why. And I think when you can bring clarity to that, that's what really moves people, but also that's the thing that keeps you going as well.
I always ask, begin with the why. Simon Sinek said it, but I'm a strong believer of it. You have to ask that why. It's one of the pillars of story gathering, that why did this happen? Why are you doing what you're doing? And why is it important for you to keep doing what you're doing? I'll now transition to Shraman, because that's one of the things that I asked WWF India. Why are you so passionate about the environment, about nature, about wildlife? Why? And while he's part of the communications team, we one of my most passionate conversation with the entire team was to find them why is everyone working in WWF India? What do they love about their job? Tell me, Shraman, and tell all of us, do organizations need to just have a communications team? Do you need a storytelling strategy? Is it any different from having a communication strategy? And if yes, what does it do for an organization?
Yes, yes, and yes to all your questions. That there is a communication strategy and the different strands to communications, but certainly storytelling is a very important strand to communications. I do feel that storytelling as a competency should not be restricted only to within a few within the communications team, but as you become leaders, higher up you go, you have to have the storytelling bit, because there's no other way to inspire. Take the big case. When Dhirubhai Ambani was setting up Reliance and he went public for the first time, when India's capital markets, IPO, etc., was still very, very small, vague names in the mid 1980s. Unless you have the ability to tell a story that people are willing to buy in and believe in it, would at that point in time, the little middle class savings of 2,000, 3,000, whatever people put that in, would that ever have come through and we are talking of the 1984-85 India, which was a very, 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 very different India. Similarly, at another high level, look at the manifesto of any political party. You know, the elections all the time. So, and you saw on their websites, you just take a look. All their manifestos look the same. However, the way some of their key leaders, whether today or even in the past, at any point in time, how they have spun that into a story, and we can go right back to Gandhiji and so on. How that story has been spun is what makes the difference at any point in time. So there are functional storytellers as we go down, who are full-time storytellers down, but the ability to be able to see a picture and narrate it into a story for the bigger audience remains at whatever level of any organization you are, and even beyond it. And that's the only way the power to influence, the power to impact, the power to change comes in. No amount of state facts and figures on any complex report or so on. All these, the million.com types or the new era e-commerce things, which have the valuations of billions that they command. A lot of it is essentially the power of stories. That is what has brought it. Because if anyone closely scrutinizes the hard numbers as they stand today, it's a vision for the future that they are able to hold on to, and that gets across. So whether it's for small organizations like ours, like WWF, or right down to convince abroad, where so few people even know the basics of what's happening in the world today, what's happening to this. So climate change, so what, AC on kar denge, 1 degree aur thanda karna padega, beyond it, how does it make a difference? Where answers can be from as abrupt and as basic to that, to different levels of sophistication. It's there are many levels and layers which come in, and we are not there yet. In fact, I will thank Ritu for guiding us along on that path. Because it was first, that itself sounded silly to people. Storytelling, don't we have better things to do? And it did shake quite a few of us up quite a bit. And but it's not an easy task to kind of spell it. But people don't often realize when they are being told a story. That's the beauty of it. If they realize they're not being told a story, but effectively it's what is a story that you're spinning. So there's obviously a lot of, it sounds easier than it is. Like any other thing, it requires hard practice and how to be able to spin that well. So it's not it's like Virat Kohli hitting a great shot. You think, he was born with it. No, I assume he slogged it out for many years, and many storytelling may require that as well in its own form. But there are no two ways that it makes a difference. There's one dimension I want to touch on. Just like Dhirubhai Ambani needed the capital markets in that India, he wanted the public to invest so that he could set up and do whatever he wanted to in the absence of a big backing. Charities like ours, we have all charities, NGOs. We only run on donations. In donation, there's no quid pro quo. It's not that you're purchasing anything. I'm asking you, please, Vrushali, please donate 5,000 rupees and help XYZ cause. Nothing tangible that you're getting in return apart from the fact that you are chipping into that cause. To keep the wheels churning, it has to be stories. Otherwise, there's no other way anyone will do that. So that's where I want to bring this story to.
Fantastic for just stopping exactly where I wanted it to bring us, because that ROI on storytelling as a skill, as an intervention, is something which I have to answer everywhere. क्या होगा कहानी सुनकर, क्या होगा कहानी सुनाकर, क्या होगा कहानी बोलना सीखकर. And it's interesting that Shraman from a not-for-profit actually brought it down to that अगर हमको fundraise करना है, we need to ask for money, and we cannot do it without storytelling. Vrushali, I'm taking this conversation to you. A lot of times our intervention, I do have over the years, I've had many individual teachers come to me to learn storytelling, and fantastic, because that connects with what I said before. Do teachers invest in themselves? And you answered that beautifully. My next is that when they say, ma'am, can you come and do this in our school? Or when the school invites us, we're going to have a special date where we talk about stories in the classroom. But since you are here and we're talking about the skill and we're talking about leadership and about investment, I want to bring this idea that who takes ownership of imparting the skill onto the entire team? Can it be that our teachers are skilled in storytelling, that we have invested in storytelling in our school, and it's our USP? It is the way we teach. It is the way we look at children, the way we handle children. Like a not-for-profit saying that we will use storytelling for do ABC, right, including fundraising. Bhavna saying using stories for leadership. Question is what do we need to do to address this with schools, that they will also start looking at it as a skill which they need to have. Smart boards, all schools now talk about smart boards. They talk about big playing field. When they talk about the school and its features, there are lots of these things which are fancy to the eye, but storytelling is not.
We have a computer lab, we have a physics lab.
Exactly, we have this lab. We don't have a story lab. Oh my God. We do have somebody coming who will talk about having heritage labs in schools. Vikramjit will be there. But today I'm going to ask you that, the leadership, what do they get by investing in storytelling?
So, yeah, like you correctly said, that leadership plays a key role in implementation, because what happens is sometimes teachers say, हमें principal allow नहीं करते, हम classroom में कर नहीं सकते, हमारे principal हमें allow नहीं करेंगे, हमारे vice principal allow नहीं करेंगे, and so on. So the approach is, if you want to implement storytelling in the classroom as a habit, not as a thinking, okay, I'll do storytelling in English. No, as an approach of teaching, it has to come from the leadership, because that's when the entire system will change. And then that will go to the students, because see, the leadership has to have a bird's eye view with the parents and the management and teachers and students. So leadership will have to first get conviction that yes, storytelling works. If they have that conviction, they have to pass that conviction to the teachers. Then teachers are free to do it in the classroom. So leadership is the top-down approach will work, because otherwise, if principal doesn't have confidence on storytelling, even parents will not have confidence on storytelling, and in turn, students will not have. If students don't have, then teachers, whatever they do, teachers will not get that. They will not reciprocate with it. Right. So the conviction in the leadership will lead to implementation of storytelling as an approach, overall approach, and not teaching a subject with story. So yeah, that's my take on it. Yeah.
And why you're saying, the leadership is important, because the leadership will define how everybody else within the organization will take at it. And I know for a fact that every time I walk into an organization, I say it's going to ruffle a lot of feathers, because what they've been used to doing, you'll have to get uncomfortable with that. You're going to now have to unlearn and relearn quite a few things.
You have to be comfortable with yourself. You have to be moving your hands, moving your body, modulate your voice, and be comfortable with it. Not to feel awkward.
Those aspects of storytelling are completely different, because how ridiculous it makes you feel at times, and yet so empowered. Those are amazing things to talk about as far as storytelling is concerned. But just as an intervention, when you say that we are here to upskill you, we are here to learn a new skill because it's very powerful, and all of that, there is that fear that I have to unlearn. I can't invest in learning again. Which is why I feel having good role models at a workspace, any workspace, is very important. With WWF, I showed great examples of, I think my first day was just about showing examples that it is working, boss, it works. See, feel, experience, it is working. So when that is from external people. But when you see a real person telling stories and navigating their career well, or being the most popular person at work, you suddenly look up to that person and say, there's something happening with that person. There's something which is very unique about this this person at work. So, Bhavna, I'd like to ask you, role models. Do we need role models, storytelling role models at the workspace, so that other women also take charge and say that I want to be like that kind of a leader, or I want to be that kind of a professional who is using the right skill set?
Yes, no, absolutely. I think role models make a huge difference. I forget who said this, but someone said you cannot be what you cannot see. And so if you can, for women, for example, when you come into an organization, the more women leaders you see at the top, you slowly start to change that story that you're telling yourselves in your own mind about what is possible for you. And so you start to adjust your level of aspiration and ambition accordingly when there are powerful role models in the organization. And just to contrast that, what also happens, and this is the unfortunate thing, what can also happen is, and there was this recent study, I'll just quickly cite that I've come across recently, which really brings this home, is men and women are coming into the workforce with this exact same level of aspiration and ambition, as in they're both coming in thinking, you know what, yes, I can get to the top. I see myself going all the way. Not everyone, of course, but roughly half of men and 50% of women are both have that aspiration. But within 2 years, just 2 short years, women start to downgrade or readjust their level of ambition and aspiration. And it goes from roughly around 43% to 60% women still having that level of ambition, versus for men, it remains about the same. And the number one reason, or maybe let me not even just say number one reason, but one of the biggest reasons that happens is because of a lack of role models. Because you come into the workplace, you see nobody who looks like you at the top, and you start to question if it's possible for you. So to your point, does it help to have these role models who look like you and who are telling these powerful stories about what helped them get there, why they are, what matters to them, their vision, everything that makes them an inspirational leader? Absolutely, it makes a huge difference to have those kind of individuals to look up to.
Okay, now with that you do need role models, and you do need to share your story and make it more convincing for people. Let's talk about using storytelling to just market. Now, we know Shraman gave that fantastic example in the beginning of using storytelling to market. So do we need stories to sell ourselves? Today's social media makes it very tempting, very stressful, that everybody needs to be out there to tell their story, or else nobody's going to come and ask you what's your story. I think some of the best things that have happened to me, or the most powerful things which I've discovered as a storyteller, is when I've asked somebody, what's your story? Because everybody wants their story to be heard, at least by one person. And somebody telling them that your story counts. I'm grateful that you're doing this for my company. I'm grateful that you're doing it this way, and you're doing the right, you're taking the right steps. But since nobody's asking anyone, what's your story? People need to be telling their own stories. Let's talk about marketing. Marketing a brand, marketing a company, storytelling for marketing. Is it very, very important? Anyone can answer that first.
I would like to take up absolutely. So being a part of startup, being in leadership of startup, storytelling, because nobody knows you, right? If I just randomly say I'm from Orange Slates, nobody knows you. But if you tell the story, the emotion, the reason why this started, people start connecting with you. And not only people outside, of course, they have to know about you, but even within your team, they start connecting with the reason why this company is here, right? And that's a very strong bond. That creates a very strong bond internally. And then they have, again, the conviction of the story that, yes, this company means something and they have something positive in mind. And that's how then they start promoting the story and so on and so forth. So yes, it's a very important, it's a key element, because story gives opportunity for people to connect emotionally with you, right? And if you create that, everybody is your fan. So yes, marketing story is very important. That's my take.
Fantastic. Who wants to go next?
If I may, sorry, Bhavna, yours. Bhavna, yours.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. No, I just wanted to talk about in what Ritu suggested is in marketing yourself. Many of us at different stages would have conducted interviews or have been interviewed. And there's one question which is asked in maybe 95% of all interviews. It's typically the first question of the interview. Would anyone in the broader audience also would they like to chat put it down in chat what that question is, which is almost always the very first question while you're just settling down and the interviewer is also looking at your CV. What's the very first question that is asked? Namita has got it bang on. Tell me about yourself, as Meher says. And I wish I had known about storytelling as a formal discipline a little earlier. But to me, it is an invite. It's an invite to tell a story. And to tell an open story, and a story about which you are the most knowledgeable, because nobody can know you better than yourself and how you want to come across. And disappointingly also, now that I know a little bit more about formal storytelling, how often that opportunity is squandered. And when you look back, almost everyone one would have perked up and taken special interest in, and the interview goes forward on a good note, is somebody who was able to hook you in with some aspect of their story. And I think finally in all recruitments, you recruit somebody whom you like apart from all the paperwork which is there, which is why they've got shortlisted to be interviewed in the first place. The the thing is a little bit of a soft feel. So that end of that story, that were they able to hook you in? So how often this open invite to tell a story is provided, and how often do we squander it? Is, I think, something all of us should think about as storytellers, and maybe when we are or the people we train when they are facing various kind of interviews. I mean, it's the moment to lead the interview whichever way you want from that point, depending on what's your stories. Just wanted to leave that thought on the table.
Bhavna.
Yes, no, absolutely. I completely agree with that, because the way I look at it, I think it's a fantastic opportunity we all have to make our stories visible. Because when you look at brands, so, at Shenomics, we help a lot of women with personal branding. And what's true for personal branding is essentially at a fundamental level, it's true for any brand, is the reason why we connect with any brand or engage with any brand or buy into any brand is really for two reasons. The one is the functional aspect of the brand that tells us what can this product or service or person do. And then the second is the emotional aspect in terms of how does this product or service or person make me feel? And both are important, but what we know for sure is even more compelling when it comes to why we engage with any brand is really the emotional aspect of a brand. And what is really the foundation of the emotional aspect of a brand? It's our stories. When we talk about, write about, represent what we believe in, what drives us, what motivates us, that's a way to make what is important to us visible to the world, and therefore make that emotional connect with our audience. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity to be doing more of that.
Fantastic. I'd like to just sort of add from my own story back from what Shraman and Bhavna just said. When I was in television, I would sit with my executive producer to hire new people in my team. By the time I quit TV, I had a big producers team, about 12 of them, and most of them young girls. And we landed up asking that question that, why do you want to work here? Tell us about yourself. So eventually everybody started talking about their CV. So we till the point when we said, okay, you don't tell anything. Okay, let us tell you our story. And we would go talk about at length about how we do things, how are we different, what kind of expectations do we have. So eventually my boss, my executive producer, we looked at each other and said, who's giving the interview and who's taking the interview? We seem to be talking more than our interviewees. Sometimes, and that sort of connects with something which I did about 3 years back with a hospitality brand, helping them tell induction stories to their employees. And my instruction was very clear. The instruction that was given to me was very, very simple and direct. That please make our employees cry. I said, cry? I mean, that's quite something that in the first day you come for an induction, you come join a new organization, and your induction is not supposed to make you cry. So no, we want you to connect with them emotionally, that they should be invested emotionally on the first day that they come. So that's very difficult to do. You see, why is it very difficult to do? Because you don't have a bond yet. You have to form that bond to feel emotional for the brand or the organization that you work for. And that can't happen on day one. So what kind of stories can I tell on day one that is already going to create that bond and make them weep? So we spoke about values. What values does the organization have and how does it exhibit it? What kind of values do people have? Introspection. And we use stories for that, so that people can identify what values do they have and how do they align with that of the organization. Will people stick? Will people leave? Today, we're talking a lot about careers, about marketing, about branding, about it being a skill and its multiple usage. But I'd really like everyone here to think deeply about anything and everything that you do and any connectedness that you have with any person. Everyone, each one of us is here just simply trying to connect, communicate, and create value for someone or with someone. We are also trying to convince that listener into engaging with us. And therefore, the storytelling becomes one of the most easiest way, or the storied way, to do all of that. Okay, so now we're really winding up towards the end of our discussion. I have some interesting questions which people have written, participants. I don't know the participants whether they are here tonight or not. So I'm going to write as an open invitation to everyone. Please, if you feel, you can write down your questions for our three panelists. I'll be happy to read them out. Or you can unmute yourself and ask your question directly. But till you figure out your own questions, let me ask some which have come in. Shraman, I think you'll be the right person to answer this, which says, why do people in corporate lose their sense of storytelling? What makes it difficult?
I think they lose their sense of humor before they lose their sense of storytelling. So perhaps if I was asked, I think the single biggest leadership attribute has to be when the shit hits the ceiling. How do you still retain your sense of humor? Because when things are going well, everyone is laughing away. No, I don't think people really lose their sense of storytelling in corporates. Maybe it's in different functions, or maybe the nature of storytelling takes different forms. But even internally, if you have an idea, if there's a proposal, if there's it is in effect a story that you have to get across. As a wider organization, in any organization, you are not all in all. You cannot have the power that I want to do this, and you have to pull people along who have to support you from different functions. Each one likes to figure out, okay, so will I get brownie points as well? So that's a thought in everyone's mind in the corporate world, especially because a lot of despite what is written, a lot of the motivation in the corporate world is, will I get a better increment or will I get a fatter bonus? So these are the hard realities of the commercial sector, because that is how it is defined. So I think it's a little inbuilt and the people who manage to be more successful are the ones who are able to tell these stories and therefore knit and forge the kind of alliances that they need even within the organization to push an idea forward. Because if you were to take an idea to the chief executive, the first thing it's like in a government. They will say, okay, has the home minister agreed? Has the finance minister agreed? Has there any foreign policy implication? Has the external minister signed off? Only then will it go to a prime minister for a sign off. Similarly, in any corporate thing, a chief executive will want to know that, does it have any human HR ramifications? Is there any financial issue to it? Is there some technological limitation that we have, etc.? So when you're going around, unless you are able to get that thing in. Having said that, I don't think anyone uses the word storytelling, and maybe it will get looked down upon if they use the word storytelling, which is rather sad. But effectively, what you are really doing through the act is an adaptation of storytelling, and therefore that's how people will kind of come into you, get inspired to say, yeah, it makes sense for us to chip into that. But I do think it can be done with a lot more of skill, interest, and sense of humor, because not all business plans work out. Many of them go wrong, and suddenly then everyone's looking to blame who's the first one, who's the bakra of the for that part. But that's a way that it goes. So it is there. Probably it's too implicit. It's not, but I think it's certainly, as awareness increases about it. And I do know of storytellers being invited into more and more corporates to kind of talk about the power of stories. Even in the commercial sector, this is something which is picking up, and that's how the trend is going in that direction for sure. It might still be a long journey while we get there, but I do think people, the leaders or the corporate employees who are good storytellers, I think they certainly have an edge in how they're able to get their way around.
I think it's all about innovating. It's about actually saying that, okay, we tried a lot of things, but now we need to do the storied way. Okay, we know it's powerful. We don't know which is the path to take and how do we get there, but let's try it the storied way. Can we do this better if we apply storytelling to it? I think that's where we are moving towards. It will happen. Renu Adhikari has a question. Do the age-old structures in the field of education prevent teachers to use storytelling mode? Vrishali, with that, I'd like to add another question, which we had, is that, do teachers now need a separate platform to tell their stories or to own their careers, so that this is how I am, this is what I am good at, this is what I need to do?
Right. So I'll first take Renu ma'am's question. So yes, do age-old structures in field. I would not agree to that. What has happened right now is that teachers are now, the result parents want is marks, right? And leadership also wants their students to score 100%, 100, the result has to be 100%, for the passing percentage has to be 100% in school. So that has created that teachers are not ready to use storytelling as a method, and they are focusing on rote learning or, practice, write, and, mug up things. And that is what has changed the way the education work. So I would not say that age-old method is stopping teachers, because earlier in time, storytelling was the way of teaching, right? And it has now gradually changed to, now we use textbooks, and now, we take up activities in a way where, it's like more hands-on, but storytelling, students are not able to reflect on what they have learned. So more is adding creativity in teaching, and storytelling is what's, like I said, leadership approach and teachers approach in teaching is the way. And and I hope that answers your question, Ms. Renu. And to the other thing you asked, yes, teachers need platforms. So I'll just give one example. Orange State started 1.5 years back in pandemic, and till today we have interacted with around 10,000 teachers in 220 trainings that we did. And those 10,000 teachers has impacted 50,000 or 100,000 more students, right? And trust me, I'm in Mumbai, I have trained, you are in Delhi right now. We are at different places. Why to like bind ourselves in that four walls of school that I'll only teach students in my neighborhood? A amazing teacher, a Sanskrit teacher sitting in, say, Trichy. Why can't that Trichy teacher teach a student sitting in Rajasthan Sanskrit? Why? There are amazing platforms available. Teachers can create amazing stories and post it on YouTube. Social media is there for you. Why are they stopping themselves that I'll only teach to students who are in my class, my 80 students? You can get 80,000 more students listening to you, and the knowledge that you have, you can impart to them. So platforms are there, teachers, please take it up, move ahead, share your learnings, and just break that boundary, because there is no boundary. You have created that boundary. Break that boundary and reach beyond. Nice. Very nice. I love that song. It's nice, happy number.
Of course, it's one of my favorite films also. That's good. You mind wanders to another story. Great. Thank you, Vrushali. We do have another question from Shivani here, but I'd like to, because you talked about using different avenues to tell their stories. This is a question which came in from one of the participants. And Bhavna, I think you are the right person to answer that, which is that at work, I'm competing with girls younger than me. They are younger, freer, can manage social media so well. I feel it's too late to get into telling stories right now.
And I would say that's just a story you're telling yourself, and you can change that story, because absolutely we have, when I look at like our community, age is honestly is just a number. You can reinvent yourself at any age. You can do anything that you want at any age. So I don't think, and this is not, I don't think a notion that I've come across at any point, that there is a timeline to when it's okay to tell stories about yourself and when it's not. So in fact, what you could do is think about what are the most, if age, for example, is a thing that you feel insecure about, or anything, generally what we always say, whatever it is that you feel most insecure about, whether it's your age, whether it's a gap in your career, whether it is a failure that you've experienced of some kind, whatever it may be, you have the power to tell a different story about that. You can reposition it as a strength. So in your case, let's just say, for argument's sake, age is something you are feeling insecure about. You can tell a story about how your years of experience, and the wisdom that it has given you, positions you in a really strong way to succeed with whatever it is that you're doing. So my short answer to your question is, absolutely don't let that be a barrier. If anything, reframe it, turn it around, tell a story about how it actually is your biggest asset and your biggest strength.
Fantastic. We also have a story from a question from Akhila, which says, marketing of a story sometimes dilutes the gravity of the story. Is it then also okay? The concept is human library, where you're sort of, trying to, I will not use the word manipulate, but you're trying to harness, or you're trying to put the focus on people's individual stories, and then therefore trying to create some kind of a value or exploit it to some extent. I hope I've understood your question right, Akhila. Is it talking about exploiting a story? Is that what you're talking about? Have you heard of the human library concept, Bhavna? No?
I think I have, actually, vaguely. Someone shared something about where you simply sit in, or rather interact with another human being, and really just share a story of your life. So instead of reading a book, you're reading the human being in front of you.
Yes, that's what Akila says. Yes, that she wants to say that is it exploiting the whole idea of storytelling by just putting people there and getting them to share their story as a human library.
Without not knowing too much about the human library, other than conceptually, to me, it sounds like the most beautiful and powerful way to connect with another human being, because like we've been talking about for the last hour, our stories make us who we are, and our stories speak louder than anything else that we could share about ourselves. And when we can make ourselves vulnerable enough to share the most powerful, the most defining moments of our lives, that is what creates connection. That is really what connects one human being to another. So my short answer would be, I think it's a beautiful way to connect with another human being. And I personally, yeah, I can't see how it could be exploited, but I'm open to thoughts from any of the other panelists.
Anyone else who would like to add their perspective? Do you think it's exploitative to do?
No, because see, storytelling is not just one format. Storytelling is not necessarily only human. The way it can be spun around can be in almost infinite number of takes. So I don't think it the right story at the right time. Yeah, of course. I mean, it's like cracking a joke at when you are at a condolence function when somebody's passed away. I mean, there are different concepts. So for every story, there's an occasion, there's a moment, there is a context. I think if we do that right, I don't think there's absolutely anything wrong with storytelling as a marketing tool or marketing of a story per se, but it has to be appropriate for the need, purpose, and context. I think that I guess that's a given.
If I can add my 2 bits to this, is that at the end of the day, every story has a purpose of its own. There's a reason why a story will be told, and the teller is expecting something in return without making it like a plug. My TED talk, I talk exactly that storytelling will be the world's most strongest currency, because you're going to tell a story and you're going to expect something back. If you're using the human library concept, or if you're using storytelling to come down and really exploit people. Exploit is a big, strong word, and it can get manipulative. It can get exploitative. If you're trying to exploit people's emotions, people's stories, just a couple of days back, I read on LinkedIn, and there is a conversation going on in around psychologists who are talking about how it is not okay to write about your client stories and use them for marketing. And that's completely unethical. So yes, you can exploit stories, and that's something which is you need to be aware that when are you doing it for the wrong reasons, and what are you expecting out of it? Are you doing it with ethics? Are you doing it with permission? Are you not trying to showcase that I'm a storyteller? Look here, I'm telling stories from my workspace. But sometimes the ethics of it have to be considered. Let's go to 2 interesting questions. Uzma asks, there is no formal degree for storytelling. And so says Uzma, who's trained under me. So how should freshers approach organization when they want to work? Shraman, Bhavna, Prashali, anyone can answer this.
How can they approach? The way normal people, so you can just approach and say, I'm a storyteller, and give a proof. I think Ritu is the best person to answer this question, actually, because when you said that you went to WWF and you said, why is story important? Right? I think.
No, I didn't go to WWF.
But I mean,
I've gone to other organizations. Yes, I've gone to other organizations. Yeah.
Yes. So I think you can just approach, because it's a skill, right? It's a skill that you have developed of storytelling. And I think the result of that skill is the most critical thing. The outcome of it is going to be assessed there. Yeah.
Certain terms gain currency over a period of time. I think storytelling is one such term that is getting more formal acceptance and currency. So increasingly, I do see, even on CVs, people talk about communications, but they also talk about storytelling as a prowess. Not so many people upfront call themselves a storyteller the way Ritu does. But I think that day is not, because probably you find it safer hiding behind that I'm a communicator and storyteller kind of a thing. But I don't think that day is too far away. But I do feel that if you feel that storytelling is what you are strong at, allow that to come through loud and clear. And even when you are looking out, or you are either writing into organizations or even going through automatic search engines, storytelling is a word that is increasingly being looked for, and it gets picked up. When there are thousands of CVs and some 30 have to be shortlisted to be met, you have to have the right words, and because that process is often very electronic. But I think that is you need to toss in the right words so that it gets through to that system, and I think that's gaining currency. I think that's certainly gaining currency.
Superb. Shivani has a very interesting question. And Shivani, maybe you can unmute yourself and ask that yourself. How to not overdo when you go the story way? Is there something like overdoing your stories? What do you mean by overdoing your stories?
Hi, thank you everybody for beautiful insights and this insightful and interesting conversation. So I just want to check and ask. So while we say story, and every time we're looking for a story, and I'm a PhD in biotechnology, and we've been working on stories throughout when we were writing research papers and all of that. But when is the time when we need to stop and halt ourselves and say, okay, enough of the story? Or is there that time? Anytime is what I want to check.
Like, enough of storytelling. No time to tell stories. Or that's it. Like, go straight hard on facts, data, information. Straight talk.
And I'll add the second question here, and why I'm saying this and where I'm coming from is that when we train teachers, so I'm working with about 200 government schools in Delhi and Haryana these days, and teachers often say that now every chapter is a story. Maths chapters are stories, science chapters are stories, but we find it troublesome because when children do it, they are sort of right there. So I understand that it's a mix of their rote learning expectations and what's happening to the children right now. But in a way, they are correct as well. So that's where I'm also stemming from education point of view and also the corporate point of view.
So my 2 cents on that question would be, and one of the things we talk about, especially let's say when we're talking about how you can leverage storytelling to be more influential, is you really want to strike the right kind of balance between logic and emotion. So you appeal to your audience with logic or logically with things like data, numbers, charts, graphs, and all of that good stuff. And then you appeal to your audience emotionally with storytelling. So is there ever a time when you don't engage in storytelling? I really can't think of a good example. In general, the rule of thumb is to have both. If you really want to engage, and also from the perspective of brain science as well, not to get too much into the science, your audience is going to be most engaged when you can appeal to both the left side of their brain and the right side. Left side through, as I said, logic, and right side through emotions and storytelling. So the balance is really what is critical. That's the first thing I would say. And then the second thing I would say is, when it comes to storytelling in general, though, what I've seen works beautifully is brevity. The idea of keeping your stories to the point. So you don't want to make your stories long-winded or having that balance tip too much to the side of stories either. Yeah, those are the 2 things I've seen work well when it comes to storytelling.
Shraman, I'd like to ask that if every brand, every not-for-profit starts telling stories and telling compelling stories, then who will the donor or the funder or the person looking to make a contribution pay money to? Whoever tells the best stories?
Whoever tells the best story which appeals to that individual potential donor. And maybe instead of one donation, they end up making 2 donations. That's also 2 different things. So that's also possible. The market also wide. It's not fixed, and that can widen. It depends on the degree of appeal. I just want to add half a sentence onto what Bhavna said. On data. See, data. Any data point can be used to tell multiple stories. Certainly more than one story. a very obvious kind of thing, India's population. You can have one line of story that all our problems are because of our huge population, and you can spin it around to kind of give it that this is the infinite human capital. It depends in which context story is being told, for to what audience and who is telling it. And that's true for even even in a corporate organization. Any kind of data that you have goes through. So I think one of the few things that we were taught when in the early days of making a present is first you decide what is the story you're going to tell. The data will follow. Don't start looking for the data first and then trying to get your story out. It often doesn't work. So I don't think there's a conflict between the two. So
yeah, I mean, I also believe with align with what Shraman said. There is not, and I agree also with what Bhavna said, that brevity is important. Knowing what your story was meant to do, and having its purpose very clearly defined will ensure that you're not doing too much of storytelling and you're just doing it appropriately. And you're not just going back to it just because that's the only thing that you know what to do. It's one of the most important skills, and being skillful is to really know about what you want to do with that story. Yeah. So great, interesting insights and wonderful conversations. I would like all my audience right now, the one who are there and including my panelists, beginning of the storied way, we had a young apprentice follow a traveler. We will continue the story, and yes, it's a story which I'm telling across all nights of the storied way. So tomorrow, my apprentice and the traveler, his master, will travel to a new land, and they will encounter a new challenge. And I hope you will come back tomorrow to hear that. But thank you so much, Shraman and Roshali and Bhavna. I want everyone to just tell me what did the apprentice learn today? What did the apprentice feel today? What are you feeling tonight? What are your thoughts? What are your questions? What are you going back with tonight? You can put that in the chat. It's going to help us steer the conversation for tomorrow. Each of our conversations are nested because there's a story linking all of them. So you must come back tomorrow to listen to my story again. And tomorrow we're going to talk about special stories for special children. Tomorrow, it's going to be the session is going to be moderated by two very able storytellers and special educators from YSB Tribe of Storytellers. This event is possible because of my lovely storytellers from my community, from my tribe, who supported me, who were my sounding board, who helped me go through all the 8 days, plan for it, find the right speakers and everything. So I wouldn't have been able to do it without them. And they are also moderating some of these events. So tomorrow, Shwetal Pandit and Charlie will be hemming the conversation, and I'll be the listener there. So do come in and stay connected to the storied way. You will find more interesting pieces of the puzzle as we go along. All right. Thank you so much, Shraman, Bhavna, Roshali. It's been an absolute delight. Great, Salome, come back tomorrow again because you're traveling. Remember, you're on a journey.
Thank you so much, Rita. It was a pleasure being here. Thank you so much, dear participants.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Bhavna.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
you, everyone. It's lovely being here.
Thank you.